Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Highway 287 between Amarillo and Fort Worth is one of Texas's most desolate roads. Endless stretches of flat land, a few scattered mesquite trees, and abandoned farmhouses forgotten by time are all that catch the eye. For 23 years I've been driving this route, hauling everything from cattle feed to construction materials. I thought I'd seen everything these lonely roads had to offer. My name is Archibald Whitmore, and the incident I experienced on a humid September night in 2019 still makes my hands tremble when I place them on the steering wheel. It was just past 2 in the morning when I noticed the flickering orange lights ahead. They were the kind of lights you see on highway maintenance vehicles. As I got closer, it began to look like a cleaning crew was working on the side of the road. There were 3 men in reflective vests, a large truck with a hydraulic lift, and an animal spread out on the asphalt, looking as if it had been killed in an accident. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about it. Texas highways are already littered with dead animals, deer, armadillos, wild boars, you name it. The state contracts special crews to remove these carcasses before they pose a hazard to drivers or start to smell in the heat. But what unsettled me was the time of day this work was being done. I had never seen a road cleanup crew working so late before. As I got closer, I slowed down and moved into the left lane for their safety. That way, I could see what they were doing more clearly. One of the 3 men caught my attention. He was tall, his hair graying, his eyes staring blankly into the darkness. He was bent over something by the side of the road that resembled a deer carcass, but he wasn't using the usual shovel, hook, or any other tool. With his bare hands, he was tearing things out of the animal's body. He looked up when my headlights hit him. A name was faintly visible on his jacket: Cornelius Blackwood. He was covered in blood up to his arms, the deep red on his hands glowing with a strange blackness in the light. He smiled at me, but it wasn't a friendly or welcoming smile. It was a smile that penetrated to my bones, one that was hard to describe. I continued driving, but I felt an indescribable unease. I had seen countless roadside cleanup crews over the years. They all did their work with shovels, hooks, or machines. I had never seen anyone working with bare hands, especially not at 2 in the morning. About 10 miles ahead, I pulled into a rest stop. I wanted to use the restroom and get some coffee from the vending machine. The facility was an old place from the 70s, a structure with flickering fluorescent lights, heavy air, and a musty smell. There, I struck up a conversation with an old truck driver traveling the same route as me. His name was Peregrine Ashford. Peregrine was sitting at one of the concrete picnic tables, nursing a thermos of coffee and smoking a cigarette. He had that weathered look that comes from decades on the road, deep lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, hands rough from handling cargo. "You see that roadkill crew back there?" I asked him. Peregrine's face went pale. He set down his thermos slowly, deliberately. "What crew?" "About 10 miles back, 3 guys cleaning up dead animals." He shook his head slowly, took a long drag from his cigarette. "There ain't no official crews working this stretch tonight. I checked the highway maintenance schedule before I left. Road's supposed to be clear until Thursday." A chill ran down my spine despite the warm night air. "You sure about that?" "Dead sure," he said. and the choice of words wasn't lost on either of us. I've been seeing things on this route lately. Things that don't add up. Peregrine told me he'd noticed an unusual pattern over the past few months. Fresh roadkill would appear in spots where there hadn't been any the night before. Not just one or two animals, but sometimes 5 or 6, all clustered together. The strange thing was, these spots were always in the middle of long, straight stretches where animals could easily see oncoming traffic. It's like someone's putting them there, he said, lowering his voice and glancing around the empty rest stop. And I'll tell you something else. I've seen that crew before. Always the same 3 men. Always in the dead of night. And always handling those carcasses like they're looking for something. I thought about Cornelius Blackwood's bloody hands. The way he'd been digging inside that deer. Looking for what? Peregrine shrugged, but his eyes were haunted. Don't know. Don't want to know. But I'll tell you what I do know. There's been more missing persons reports along this stretch in the past year than in the previous decade combined. He pulled out his phone, showed me a local news website he had bookmarked. Article after article about missing motorists, abandoned vehicles, people who simply vanished between Amarillo and Fort Worth. The authorities blamed it on the harsh environment, people getting lost in the wilderness after their cars broke down. But Peregrine had a different theory. Look at the pattern, he said, zooming in on a map where he'd marked each disappearance with a red dot. They're all within a 20-mile radius of where you saw that crew tonight. We talked for another hour, sharing stories we'd heard from other drivers. Stories about strange meat processing facilities that had opened up in the area, operating only at night. About trucks with refrigerated trailers that took unmarked exits to nowhere. About the smell that sometimes drifted across the highway on still nights. A smell like copper and decay. When we finally parted ways, Peregrine gave me his number. Call me if you see anything else, he said. And be careful out there. Whatever's happening on this stretch of road, it's getting worse. I took a different route on my return trip, adding an extra hour to my drive, but avoiding that stretch of 287 entirely. I tried to put the whole thing out of my mind. Told myself I was being paranoid. But I couldn't forget Cornelius Blackwood's smile, or the way he'd looked at me like I was prey that had gotten away. 2 weeks later, I was back on the same route. This time, I was prepared. I had my dash cam running, and I'd made sure to note the exact mile markers where I'd seen the crew before. It was another late-night run, around 3 in the morning this time. The moon was new, leaving the landscape in almost total darkness beyond my headlights. Sure enough, near mile marker 167, I saw the orange lights again, the same truck, the same 3 men. But this time, there were no dead animals on the road. Instead, they were unloading something from their truck. Several large black bags, the kind you might use for industrial waste. Heavy-duty plastic, tied at the top with yellow rope. I slowed down again, trying to get a better look without being obvious about it. That's when I saw one of the bags move. Not the settling motion of something heavy finding its position, but a deliberate, struggling movement. Like something inside was trying to get out. My hands tightened on the wheel. Every instinct told me to floor it, to get away from there as fast as possible. But I forced myself to maintain a steady speed to not draw attention. As I passed, Cornelius Blackwood looked up again. This time, he wasn't smiling. He was watching me with an intensity that felt like a physical weight. The other 2 men stopped what they were doing and stared as well. One of them, a younger man with a scraggly beard, took a step toward the road like he was thinking about flagging me down. But Blackwood put a hand on his shoulder, shook his head slightly. They all watched as I drove past, their eyes following my taillights in the darkness. I made it another 5 miles before I pulled over, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I called 911, told them about the suspicious activity at mile marker 167. The dispatcher sounded skeptical but said they'd send a unit to check it out. An hour later, I got a call back. The officers had found nothing. No truck, no crew, no bags. Just a clean stretch of highway with a few old bloodstains on the asphalt. They suggested I might have been tired, seeing things in the dark. But I knew what I'd seen. I had it on my dash cam. Or so I thought. When I checked the footage later, the video file for that exact time period was corrupted. 20 minutes of static right when I'd passed the crew. The files before and after were fine, crystal clear. But those crucial minutes were gone. I started asking around at truck stops, talking to other drivers who ran that road. Most hadn't seen anything, or if they had, they weren't talking. But a few had stories. Stories whispered over coffee in the early morning hours, shared with the understanding that speaking them too loudly might invite trouble. One driver, who asked to remain anonymous, told me he'd once followed one of those roadkill trucks off the highway. It had taken an unmarked exit near Childress, turned down a dirt road that led to an old industrial complex about 15 miles from the interstate. Used to be a slaughterhouse back in the 80s, he told me. Shut down after some health code violations, but someone's using it again. I parked at a distance, watched through binoculars as they unloaded their cargo into a loading dock. He paused, his coffee cup trembling slightly in his hands. I swear I heard screaming coming from inside. Human screaming. I got out of there fast. Didn't stop driving until I hit Oklahoma. Haven't taken that route since. Another driver, a woman who'd been running Texas routes for 15 years, told me about a time she'd broken down near mile marker 171. It was just after midnight, and she'd blown a tire. She'd called for roadside assistance and was told it would be 45 minutes. 20 minutes in, I see these orange lights coming up behind me, she said. 3 men get out, start walking toward my cab. Something about them just felt wrong. The way they moved, too coordinated, like they'd done this before. I locked my doors, started laying on the horn. Lucky for me, there was another trucker about a mile back who heard it and came to check. As soon as he pulled up, those 3 got back in their truck and drove off. She showed me her logbook from that night. She'd written down the license plate of the truck, but when she tried to run it later, it came back as non-existent. The plate didn't match any vehicle in the system. I decided to do some research of my own. I spent my off days at the library in Amarillo, going through old newspapers and public records. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 5 years, 17 people had vanished along that stretch of Highway 287. Their cars were usually found on the shoulder, out of gas or with a flat tire. No signs of struggle, no bodies ever recovered. The victims ranged in age from 19 to 63, men and women, locals and travelers passing through. The only thing they had in common was that they'd all disappeared at night. But that wasn't the worst part. I found older cases too, going back decades. The numbers were lower in earlier years, but the pattern was the same. People vanishing, vehicles abandoned, no trace ever found. If my calculations were right, over 100 people had disappeared along that stretch of highway since 1985. The timeline matched up with something else I discovered. In 1985, a man named Cornelius Blackwood had been arrested for the first time. He'd been caught with human remains in his truck, claimed he'd found them on the side of the road and was taking them to the authorities. The case fell apart due to lack of evidence, and Blackwood walked free. He was arrested again in 2004, this time for aggravated assault and kidnapping. A woman had escaped from a building in Wheeler County. claimed she'd been held there for weeks along with others. But by the time police arrived, the building was empty, cleaned out. The woman's testimony was deemed unreliable due to the trauma she'd suffered, and once again, the case fell apart. Blackwood served 15 years on the lesser charges, was released in 2019. The same year, I'd first seen him with the roadkill crew. I compiled all this information into a folder and took it to the state police. The detective I spoke to, a tired-looking man named Morrison, flipped through it with increasing concern. "This is substantial," he admitted. "But it's all circumstantial. We can't get a warrant based on speculation and coincidence." "What about the missing people?" I asked. "Missing persons cases are complicated," he said. "Some of these people had reasons to disappear: debts, domestic situations, criminal records, and without bodies, without crime scenes, we have no evidence that anything criminal even happened." He handed the folder back to me, but I could see in his eyes that he believed something was wrong. "Be careful," he said quietly. "And if you see anything concrete, call immediately." I left frustrated, but not surprised. I'd learned that the system wasn't designed to catch predators who were careful, who knew how to work in the gaps, who understood that the highway at night was a lawless place where anything could happen. I started carrying a gun after that, a .38 revolver I kept in my door panel. I also installed better locks on my cab, upgraded my dash cam system, and started keeping detailed logs of everything I saw on my routes. 6 months passed without incident. I began to think maybe the crew had moved on, spooked by the increased attention. Then, one foggy night in March, I saw them again. This time, they weren't on the highway. I'd stopped at a 24-hour diner near Clarendon to grab dinner and fuel up. It was around 11 at night, and the parking lot was mostly empty except for a few other trucks and cars. I was sitting at the counter, working on a plate of chicken fried steak, when I noticed a truck pull into the lot. It was the same truck I'd seen before, the one with the orange lights. My appetite vanished. 3 men got out and entered the diner. Cornelius Blackwood, the younger man with the scraggly beard, and a third man I hadn't seen clearly before. He was older, heavy-set, with small eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. They sat in a booth in the corner, ordered coffee. I kept my head down, tried to look like I was focused on my food, but I could feel them watching me. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Dolores, who I'd chatted with before, seemed nervous serving them. Her hands shook as she poured their coffee. I finished my meal quickly, paid, and headed for the door. As I passed their booth, Cornelius Blackwood spoke. "Archibald Whitmore," he said, reading from what looked like a shipping manifest. "That's you, isn't it? Says here you run regular routes between Amarillo and Fort Worth." I stopped, my hand on the door handle. "That's right. Dangerous stretch of road," he continued, not looking up from the paper. "Lot of accidents, lot of breakdowns. Man needs to be careful out there." The threat was clear. I left without responding, got in my truck and drove away. In my mirrors I could see them watching through the diner window. That night I called Peregrine Ashford. Told him about the encounter. He wasn't surprised. "They're getting bolder," he said, "or maybe they just don't care about being subtle anymore. You need to watch your back." "What about the police?" I asked. "What about them? Those boys have been operating for years, maybe decades. You think the local cops don't know? Either they're being paid off, or they're too scared to do anything about it." He was right, of course. This was bigger than just 3 men in a truck. There had to be a whole network involved. Processing facilities, distribution channels, customers for whatever horrific product they were harvesting. I started varying my routes, taking different roads when possible, changing my schedule to avoid night driving on 287. But work is work, and sometimes I had no choice but to take that route. It was during one of these unavoidable night runs that everything came to a head. I was hauling a load of construction materials to Fort Worth, running behind schedule due to weather delays. It was past midnight when I hit that familiar stretch of 287. I'd been monitoring my mirrors constantly, watching for any sign of the roadkill crew. Around mile marker 184, my engine started sputtering. I couldn't believe it. I'd just had the truck serviced the week before. Everything had been running perfectly. But there I was, losing power, rolling to a stop on the shoulder of Highway 287 at 1 in the morning. Exactly where I'd sworn I'd never be. I immediately called for roadside assistance, but they said it would be at least 2 hours. The nearest service truck was dealing with a multi-car pileup on I-40. I was on my own. I locked my doors, kept my engine running as long as I could, trying to diagnose the problem. The fuel gauge showed plenty of gas. The temperature was normal. No warning lights except for the general engine trouble indicator. 20 minutes passed, 30. Then I saw the orange lights in my side mirror. The truck pulled up behind me, and 3 men got out. Cornelius Blackwood was in the lead, carrying what looked like a tire iron. The younger man had a coil of rope over his shoulder. The third man was carrying a large plastic sheet, the kind you'd use to protect floors during painting. They walked up to my cab, and Blackwood tapped on the window with the tire iron. "Need some help, friend?" he called out, his voice muffled by the glass. I shook my head, held up my phone to show I'd already called for help. He smiled that horrible smile again and tapped harder. "Come on now," he said. "We're here to help." "We're the cleanup crew." The way he said cleanup made my stomach turn. I tried starting my engine again, pumping the gas, turning the key desperately. The younger man had moved around to the passenger side, was trying the door handle. The third man was spreading the plastic sheet on the ground beside my truck. I grabbed my gun from the door panel, held it up where they could see it. "Back off," I shouted. "I've called the police." Blackwood laughed. "Police? Out here? They're 40 minutes away on a good night. And this ain't a good night." He swung the tire iron at my side window. The safety glass cracked but didn't break. I knew it would only take a few more hits. I tried the engine one more time, praying desperately. It caught. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. I threw it in gear and floored it, gravel spraying as I pulled away. In my mirrors, I could see them standing there, watching me go. Blackwood was still smiling. I didn't stop until I reached Fort Worth, running on fumes and adrenaline. When I finally had my truck looked at, the mechanic found sugar in my gas tank. Someone had sabotaged it while I was at a truck stop earlier that day. The only reason it hadn't completely destroyed my engine was that I'd caught it in time. "You're lucky," the mechanic said. "Another few miles and you'd have been completely stranded." Lucky. I thought about those plastic sheets, that rope, Blackwood's smile. I didn't feel lucky. I felt hunted. I filed another police report, but nothing came of it. Cornelius Blackwood and his crew were ghosts as far as the law was concerned. They existed in the space between what everyone knew and what anyone could prove. That was 3 years ago. I still drive trucks, but I've never gone back to that route. I've taken a pay cut, lost some contracts, but I'm alive. That's more than some can say. Last week, Peregrine Ashford sent me a newspaper clipping. Human remains had been found in an illegal dump site near Wheeler County. The remains were too degraded to identify, but they estimated at least a dozen individuals. The investigation was ongoing, but no arrests had been made. He'd written a note on the clipping. "They're getting sloppy." Or maybe they just don't care anymore. I've thought about going public with this story many times. Thought about calling newspapers, posting online, trying to warn people. But who would believe me? A trucker with a wild story about a murderous roadkill crew. It sounds like something out of a horror movie, but it's real. It's happening right now, on the dark highways of Texas. The roadkill crew is out there, hunting, collecting, doing God knows what with their victims. And the worst part is they're not the only ones. I've heard similar stories from other states, other highways. It's a network, a system, operating in the shadows of America's transportation infrastructure. We trust that the highways are safe, that the people we encounter there are just travelers like us, trying to get from one place to another. But some of them are predators, using the isolation and anonymity of the road to hunt. And some of them, like Cornelius Blackwood and his crew, have turned it into an art form. So, if you ever find yourself driving through Texas late at night, and you see those orange lights ahead, remember my story. Remember that not everyone who looks official is there to help. Remember that the dark stretches of highway are hunting grounds for things that shouldn't exist in a civilized world. And whatever you do, whatever happens, don't stop. Don't ever stop. Keep driving until you reach the lights of a city, the safety of witnesses, the protection of crowds. Because on those lonely roads, in those dark hours, you're not just a traveler, you're potential prey, and the roadkill crew is always working, always watching, always ready to add to their collection. I still have nightmares about that night, about what would have happened if my engine hadn't started. I see those plastic sheets, that rope, Blackwood's dead eyes and cruel smile. I wake up in cold sweats, checking my mirrors even though I'm safe in my bedroom. The highway has never felt safe since then. Every breakdown, every flat tire, every mechanical failure feels like a trap. Every crew working on the roadside makes me nervous. Every set of orange lights in my mirrors makes my heart race. But the worst part is knowing they're still out there, still hunting, still collecting, and there's nothing I can do to stop them. The law won't help. The authorities don't care or don't believe. And anyone who gets too close to the truth becomes their next target. Peregrine called me last month. His voice was different, scared in a way I'd never heard before. They came to my house, he said, left something on my doorstep. What? A deer heart, fresh, still warm, and a note. What did it say? Stop talking. He's gone dark since then, won't answer his phone, won't respond to messages. I drove by his place once, but his truck was gone, house empty. Maybe he ran, maybe they got him. I don't know which is worse. I'm telling this story now because someone needs to know. Someone needs to remember. If something happens to me, if I disappear like all the others, at least there will be a record. At least someone will know to look for Cornelius Blackwood and his crew. They operate in the spaces between cities, in the dark hours when good people are asleep. They use our trust in uniformed workers, our assumption that official-looking vehicles are there to help. They exploit the isolation of the highway, the vulnerability of stranded motorists, the indifference of overworked police departments. And they're not going to stop. Not until someone stops them. But who's going to do that? Who's going to risk their life to hunt the hunters? Not me. I'm a coward. I ran, and I keep running. Every day I don't drive that stretch of 287 is a day I choose my life over justice for their victims. Every night I don't call the FBI, don't go to the media, don't raise hell until someone listens, is a night I let them continue their work. We're all complicit in our silence. All of us who know but say nothing, who see but keep driving, who survive but don't fight back. The roadkill crew counts on that. They count on our fear, our self-preservation instinct. our reluctance to get involved. They know that most people will choose to forget, to rationalize, to pretend they didn't see what they saw. And so they continue, night after night, mile after mile, victim after victim. The highway is their killing ground, and we're all potential prey. I think about the families of the missing, the parents, spouses, children who will never know what happened to their loved ones. They'll spend years hoping, searching, praying for answers that will never come. Because the truth is too horrible, too unbelievable, too dangerous to reveal. The truth is that monsters are real. They don't hide under beds or in closets. They drive trucks with orange lights. They wear reflective vests. They smile at you as they prepare to end your life. And on Highway 287, between Amarillo and Fort Worth, they're always working, always hunting, always waiting for the next broken soul to cross their path. My name is Barnaby Thornfield, and I've been hauling refrigerated cargo across Texas for the better part of 30 years. In all that time, through all those late-night runs and lonely highways, I've developed a simple rule. Never ask questions about the cargo. You pick it up, you deliver it, you get paid. That's the job. But sometimes, even when you don't ask questions, the answers find you anyway. And sometimes those answers are more horrifying than anything you could have imagined. It was a scorching August night in 2021 when I got the call for a rush job. My dispatcher, a gruff old-timer named Earl, said there was a load that needed to go from a meat processing plant outside of Dalhart to a distribution center in Houston. The pay was triple the usual rate, cash bonus on completion, but it had to leave immediately and arrive before dawn. "What's the rush?" I asked, already knowing I'd take the job. Triple rate was too good to pass up. "Don't know, don't care," Earl replied. "Manager specifically requested you. Said you were reliable. Guy named Obadiah Grimsby. You interested or not?" I was interested. My daughter had just started college, and the extra money would help with her tuition. I should have wondered why they specifically requested me, why they were paying so much, why it had to be done in the dead of night. But money has a way of silencing those little warning voices in your head. The plant was called Grimsby Premium Meats, located about 20 miles outside of Dalhart on a stretch of farm road that hadn't seen maintenance since the Carter administration. The GPS struggled to find it, kept trying to redirect me back to the highway. When I finally arrived at the facility around 11 p.m., I understood why. The place looked abandoned. Half the windows were boarded up, weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot, rust eating away at the metal siding. The only signs of life were a few security lights and a newer-looking loading dock that seemed out of place against the decay. If it weren't for the fresh tire tracks in the dirt and the hum of refrigeration units, I would have thought I was in the wrong place. A man emerged from a side door as I backed up to the loading dock. Obadiah Grimsby was not what I expected. Tall, gaunt, wearing an expensive suit that seemed utterly out of place in a meat-packing plant. His face was angular, almost skeletal, with deep-set eyes that never seemed to blink. When he shook my hand, his grip was cold despite the August heat. "Mr. Thornfield," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. "Thank you for accommodating us on such short notice. We have a very particular shipment that needs to reach Houston before the morning shift arrives." "No problem," I said, trying to ignore how his presence made my skin crawl. "Just point me to the paperwork and we'll get loaded up." "Ah, yes, the paperwork." He produced a clipboard with shipping manifests, all properly filled, out. Everything looked legitimate. USDA stamps, health certificates, weight declarations. The cargo was listed as premium processed beef products, specialty cuts. As I reviewed the documents, workers began loading my trailer. They moved with an odd efficiency, never speaking, never making eye contact. They were all wearing full hazmat-style suits despite the heat, complete with face shields that obscured their features. I'd seen plenty of safety gear in meat plants before, but nothing this extreme for already processed product. "Quite the setup you have here," I commented, watching them load sealed white containers into my refrigerated trailer. "We take contamination very seriously," Grimsby replied. "Our clients pay premium prices for guaranteed quality. No room for error." One of the workers stumbled while carrying a container, nearly dropping it. Grimsby's entire demeanor changed instantly. He barked something in a language I didn't recognize, and the worker froze. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw genuine terror in the man's body language, visible even through the hazmat suit. "Careful with the merchandise," Grimsby said, his calm returning as quickly as it had vanished. "It's quite valuable." The loading continued for another hour. I counted 48 containers in total, each one sealed with numbered locks and stamped with handling instructions. "Keep frozen. Do not open. Authorized personnel only." When they finished, Grimsby handed me an envelope. Inside was $5,000 cash. "A bonus for your discretion," he said. "This shipment is quite important to our clients. We trust you'll deliver it without any complications." "I'm not in the habit of opening cargo," I assured him. "Good. Oh, and Mr. Thornfield, you'll be joined by one of our drivers. Company policy for high-value shipments. He'll follow in his own vehicle, make sure everything arrives safely." A younger man appeared from the shadows. Where Grimsby was gaunt, this one, introduced as Algernon Fairfax, was muscular and compact, with the build of someone who knew violence intimately. He had pale blue eyes that seemed to look through rather than at you, and a smile that never reached them. "Just a precaution," Fairfax said, his voice flat and emotionless. "I'll be right behind you the whole way." I didn't like it, but 5,000 cash was 5,000 cash. I secured the trailer, did my final checks, and pulled out of the facility with Fairfax's black SUV following close behind. The first hour was uneventful. I settled into the familiar rhythm of night driving, the highway stretching endlessly ahead, the hum of the refrigeration unit providing white noise. But something felt off. Maybe it was the way Fairfax maintained exact following distance, never falling back or getting closer. Maybe it was the weight of the cargo. It felt wrong somehow, the trailer handling differently than it should for processed meat. It was around 1 a.m. when I noticed the smell. At first, it was subtle, barely noticeable over the diesel fumes and the usual odors of the road. But it grew stronger with each mile. A sweet, cloying scent that reminded me of flowers at a funeral home, mixed with something metallic. It was coming from the trailer. I checked my temperature gauges. The refrigeration unit was working perfectly, maintaining a steady 32 degrees. But the smell kept getting stronger. By the time I reached the outskirts of Amarillo, it was making me nauseous. I needed to stop to check what was happening, but every time I started to slow down, Fairfax would flash his high beams. The message was clear: keep driving. But near Canyon, Texas, fate intervened. A massive accident had shut down the highway completely. Police, fire trucks, ambulances everywhere. Traffic was being diverted through local roads, adding at least an hour to the journey. I pulled onto the shoulder to wait it out, hoping the accident would clear quickly. Fairfax pulled up behind me, got out of his SUV and walked to my cab. His hand was inside his jacket, and I knew without seeing that it was resting on a weapon. "Why are we stopped?" he asked. "Accident," Roads blocked, nothing I can do about it. He studied the scene ahead, calculating. How long? Could be hours. Maybe we should call Grimsby, let him know we'll be late. No. The word was sharp, final. We don't stop. We don't call. We find another route. The detour will add, I don't care, move, now. There was something in his voice that made argument impossible. I put the truck in gear and followed the detour signs onto a narrow farm road that would eventually reconnect with the highway past the accident. The road was dark, empty, winding through cotton fields and past abandoned farmhouses. The smell from the trailer was getting worse, and now I could hear something too. A dripping sound, barely audible over the engine noise. Then I saw it in my side mirror. Liquid was breaking from the trailer. In the red glow of my taillights it looked black, but I knew what color it really was. Blood. My refrigerated trailer was leaking blood. I had to stop. Whatever was in those containers, it wasn't processed beef. Every instinct screamed at me to pull over, to refuse to go another mile, to call the police, but Fairfax was right behind me, and the weight of his presence, the implied threat, kept my foot on the accelerator. We drove for another hour on back roads, the GPS constantly recalculating, trying to get us back to the main highway. The leak was getting worse. I could see it streaming from the trailer now, leaving a trail on the asphalt that glistened in the moonlight. Finally, we reached a section of Highway 287 that would take us south toward Houston. But as I turned onto the on-ramp, something in the trailer shifted. There was a loud bang, like one of the containers had broken loose, and suddenly the leak became a pour. I had no choice. I pulled into an abandoned rest stop, ignoring Fairfax's flashing lights and angry horn. The moment I stopped, he was at my door, gun drawn. I told you not to stop. The trailer's compromised, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Whatever's in there is leaking out. If we get pulled over like this, we're both going to prison. He looked at the steady stream of blood pooling beneath the trailer, his jaw clenched. Then he pulled out his phone, dialed a number. We have a problem, he said to whoever answered. Container breach, significant leakage. He listened for a moment. Understood. He hung up, then looked at me. Open it. What? Open the trailer. We need to reseal the damaged container. I don't have the keys to those locks. He produced a set of keys from his pocket. I do. Open it. Every part of me wanted to refuse, to run, to drive away and leave him standing there. But there was nowhere to run. He had a gun, and we both knew he'd use it. I walked to the back of the trailer, unlocked the heavy doors, and swung them open. The smell hit me like a physical force. Death. Raw, immediate, unmistakable. The floor of the trailer was awash in blood and other fluids. Several of the containers had split open, their contents spilling out. But it wasn't beef. It wasn't any kind of animal meat I recognized. The cuts were too precise, too carefully packaged. The bones were wrong. The shape of the joints, the length of the limbs. I'd hauled enough legitimate meat to know what butchered cattle looked like. This wasn't cattle. Help me move these, Fairfax said, climbing into the trailer like the horror around him was perfectly normal. We need to restack the intact containers and seal the damaged ones. These are products, he said firmly. Very expensive products for very particular clients. Now, help me or join them. The threat was clear. I climbed into the trailer, trying not to look too closely at what we were handling, trying not to think about what I was seeing. We worked in silence, restacking containers, using plastic sheeting and duct tape to contain the leaks. My hands were covered in blood, my clothes soaked with it. As we worked, one of the damaged containers split further, and something rolled out onto the trailer floor. I found myself staring at it, unable to look away, unable to process what I was seeing. It was wearing a ring. A wedding ring. "Don't think about it," Fairfax said, kicking the object back into a container. "Just do the job." But I couldn't stop thinking about it. About the careful packaging, the professional cuts, the refrigerated preservation. This wasn't some crime of passion or accidental death. This was an operation. Industrial scale, professional, organized. We finished sealing what we could, but the trailer was still a horror show. Blood everywhere. The smell overwhelming. There was no way we could continue to Houston like this. Even Fairfax seemed to realize it. He made another call. "We need cleanup. Rest stop off 287, mile marker 196. He listened. "1 hour? Understood." He hung up and turned to me. "We wait. They'll send a clean truck, transfer the intact cargo." "And then what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Then you forget this ever happened. You take your money, you go home, and you never speak of it again." "People will look for them," I said, gesturing at the trailer. "Families, police—" "No," he interrupted. "They won't. The products we handle are carefully selected. No families, no friends. No one who'll miss them. Homeless, addicts, illegals, runaways, people who've already disappeared from society. We just complete the process." The casual way he said it, like he was discussing inventory management, made it worse somehow. This wasn't madness or passion. It was business. "Why?" I managed to ask. Who buys this?" Fairfax actually smiled then, a genuine expression that was somehow worse than his usual. Blank stare. "You'd be surprised. Rich people with particular tastes. Medical researchers who need materials without paperwork. Foreign buyers with cultural preferences. It's a bigger market than you'd think." A van arrived within the hour, unmarked, carrying 3 men in those same hazmat suits I'd seen at the plant. They worked with practiced efficiency, transferring the intact containers to a clean, refrigerated truck. They had industrial cleaners, pressure washers, chemicals that dissolved organic matter. Within 90 minutes, my trailer looked like it had never been used. Grimsby arrived as they were finishing. He surveyed the scene with those unblinking eyes, then approached me. "Mr. Thornfield, you've seen things tonight that weren't meant to be seen. This puts us in a difficult position." I tensed, expecting to feel Fairfax's gun at the back of my head. But Grimsby continued. "However, you've proven yourself reliable. Discreet. These are valuable qualities in our business." He pulled out another envelope, thicker than the first. $20,000 for your troubles and your continued silence. "I don't want your money." "Yes, you do," he said calmly. "Because taking it makes you complicit. It makes you part of this. And that means we have no reason to view you as a threat. Refuse it, and you become a liability. I think you're smart enough to understand what happens to liabilities." He was right. I was trapped. Take the money and become part of their horror, or refuse and become their next victim. With shaking hands, I took the envelope. "Excellent choice. Now, you'll continue to Houston with an empty trailer. Log it as a canceled shipment. The client will confirm they refused delivery due to quality concerns. Your paperwork will all be in order." "And if I talk?" "You won't," Grimsby said with absolute certainty. "Because you have a daughter at Texas A&M Sarah, isn't it? Pre-med, lives in Mosher Hall, room 314. Studies at Evans Library most nights. Likes to run the campus trails early in the morning, usually alone." My blood went cold. The message was clear. "We know everything about you, Mr. Thornfield. Your roots, your schedules, your family. So you'll keep our secret because the alternative is unpleasant. They left me there at the rest stop, sitting in my cab, staring at the envelope full of blood money. I drove to Houston with an empty trailer, filed my paperwork showing a refused delivery, and went home. But I couldn't forget. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those containers, those careful cuts, that wedding ring. I knew that somewhere, Grimsby and his operation continued. More victims, more shipments, more trucks carrying horror through the Texas night. I tried to research, to find out more about Grimsby Premium Meats, but the company didn't exist, at least not officially. The plant outside Dalhart was registered to a shell company based overseas. The property taxes were paid through a law firm that claimed attorney-client privilege. Every trail led to dead ends. I started noticing things, though. Other refrigerated trucks running late-night routes from nowhere to nowhere. Drivers who wouldn't talk about their cargo. Rest stops that were too clean, like someone had pressure-washed away evidence. Missing person reports that never made the news. People vanishing without anyone seeming to care. The network was bigger than just Grimsby. It had to be. Processors, transporters, distributors, clients. A whole shadow economy built on the worst kind of commerce. And now I was part of it, whether I wanted to be or not. I kept driving, but never took another job from Earl. He called a few times, said there were more special deliveries available, same rates, same discretion required. I always refused. Eventually, he stopped calling. 6 months later, I saw a news story about human remains found in an abandoned warehouse in Houston. The police called it an isolated incident, the work of a single deranged individual. But I recognized the location. It was 3 blocks from where I was supposed to deliver that shipment. I thought about going to the FBI, telling them everything. But then I'd remember Grimsby's words about my daughter, about knowing everything. And I'd see unmarked vans in my neighborhood, catch glimpses of Fairfax at truck stops, always watching, always reminding me of my place in their world. So I stayed quiet. I kept driving. I tried to pretend that night never happened. But the truth haunts me. Every refrigerated truck I pass might be carrying horror. Every meat processing plant might be hiding something unspeakable. Every missing person might be ending up in those containers. A year passed, then 2. I convinced myself that maybe the operation had been shut down, that Grimsby and his people had moved on or been caught. I started to sleep better, the nightmares fading from nightly to weekly to occasional. Then, last month, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice was familiar. Algernon Fairfax. "Mr. Thornfield, we have another job for you." "I'm not interested." "You don't have a choice. Tomorrow night, same plant, same arrangement. Don't make us come find you." I hung up, but I knew it wasn't over. They owned me now, had owned me since the moment I took their money. I was part of their machine, another cog in their horrific operation. I didn't go to the plant the next night. Instead, I drove to my daughter's college, parked outside her dorm, and waited. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe to see Fairfax or Grimsby, to confront them, to make some kind of stand. But nothing happened. Students came and went, laughing, living their lives, oblivious to the darkness that existed just beyond their safe little bubble. My phone rang. Grimsby this time. "You're not at the plant, Mr. Thornfield." "I'm done." "Find another driver." "I'm afraid it doesn't work that way. You see, we've been very patient with you, very understanding, but patience has limits. If you touch my daughter, we won't need to," he interrupted, "because you're going to do exactly what we tell you. You're going to drive our shipments, you're going to keep our secrets, and you're going to do it with a smile. or we'll make sure the authorities find evidence linking you to our operations. Your truck's GPS history, your fingerprints on the containers, the money in your bank account. You'll go to prison for life, Mr. Thornfield, and your daughter will grow up knowing her father was a monster. He was right again. They had me completely trapped. Every choice led to horror, either for me or for the people I loved. One more thing, Grimsby added. We know you've been asking questions, doing research. That needs to stop, immediately. Consider this your only warning. I drove to the plant that night, loaded another shipment of containers, followed another escort to another destination, took another envelope of money, became a little more complicit, a little more damned. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've made 4 more runs for them. Each one chips away at what's left of my soul. I've stopped looking in the containers, stopped thinking about what's inside. It's easier that way, safer, but I can't stop completely. Can't forget that these aren't just products, they're people. Someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's parent. They had lives, dreams, fears. And now they're reduced to inventory, shipped in refrigerated trucks through the Texas night to satisfy appetites that shouldn't exist. I've started keeping a journal, documenting everything I can remember, dates, locations, names. Maybe someday, when I'm beyond their reach, when my daughter is safe, someone will find it and expose the truth. Or maybe I'm just trying to confess, to leave some record that I knew what I was doing was wrong, even if I was too weak to stop it. The other drivers know something's different about me now. They see it in my eyes, the weight I carry. Some avoid me, sensing the darkness that surrounds me. Others, I suspect, carry similar burdens. We're a brotherhood of the damned, hauling nightmares across the highways, keeping secrets that would shatter society's comfortable illusions. I still see Fairfax sometimes at truck stops or rest areas. He never approaches, just watches, making sure I remember my place, and I do. I'm a prisoner in my own life, chained to their operation by fear and complicity. Last week, I recognized one of the missing persons on a milk carton at a diner. A young woman from Oklahoma, disappeared 2 months ago. I'd hauled a shipment from that area around the same time. Was she in one of those containers? Did I transport someone's daughter to her final destination? I'll never know for certain. That's part of the torture. The not knowing, the wondering, the imagining. Every shipment might be someone who could have been saved if I'd just been brave enough to speak up. But I'm not brave. I'm a coward who values his own life and his daughter's safety over justice for the dead. I tell myself that even if I went to the authorities, Grimsby's network would continue. They'd replace me with another driver, kill me and my family as an example, and nothing would change. The machine would keep running, grinding up the forgotten and unwanted, feeding appetites in the shadows. Maybe that's just rationalization. Maybe I'm just trying to justify my cowardice. But what would you do? If it was your family they threatened, your life they controlled, would you be any different? I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I dream of highways slick with blood, of refrigerated trucks stretching to the horizon, of Grimsby's cold eyes and Fairfax's empty smile. I dream of the wedding ring, spinning on the trailer floor, catching the light one last time before disappearing into a container. Sometimes I think about ending it all, driving my truck off a bridge, taking their secrets with me. But then I think about my daughter, about the life she's building, and I keep going, keep driving, keep delivering, keep quiet. The truth is, there are things happening in the darkness that most people can't imagine. Industries built on horror, networks of evil operating just beneath the surface of normal life. And once you're pulled into that world, there's no escape. You become part of it, complicit in it, trapped by it. Every refrigerated truck you see might be carrying nightmares. Every meat processing plant might be hiding something unspeakable. Every missing person might be ending up in containers, shipped to buyers with appetites that should not exist. But you'll never know. Because people like me, cowards who choose survival over justice, keep the secrets. We maintain the illusion that the world is safer than it really is. We enable the monsters because we're too afraid to fight them. Grimsby called yesterday, another special delivery next week. Triple rate, cash bonus, the usual terms. I'll do it. Of course I'll do it. I don't have a choice anymore. I am the driver who knows too much and says nothing. I am the accomplice who chose his family over strangers. I am the coward who helps the darkness spread. And somewhere out there, in a plant that doesn't officially exist, Obadiah Grimsby is preparing another shipment. Algernon Fairfax is selecting another escort route. And victims who've already been forgotten by the world are being processed, packaged, and prepared for delivery. The machine never stops. The highway never sleeps. And drivers like me keep the whole horrific system running. One delivery at a time, one secret at a time, one soul at a time. God help me, I've become one of them. Not a monster who kills, but something perhaps worse. A man who knows about the killing and does nothing to stop it. A man who chooses his own safety over justice. A man who drives their cargo through the Texas night and pretends not to know what's inside. That's my confession. That's my burden. That's the truth I'll carry until either they kill me or I find the courage to fight back. But I don't think that courage will ever come. I think I'll die as I've lived these past years. A coward, the accomplice, a keeper of horrific secrets. And the trucks will keep rolling. The containers will keep shipping. The forgotten will keep disappearing. Because that's how the machine works. That's how the darkness spreads. One compromised soul at a time, one terrible choice at a time, one blood-soaked delivery at a time. Welcome to the real world, the one that exists in the shadows of the Texas highways, where meat isn't always what it seems, where cargo can scream, where drivers like me sell our souls for our family's safety. Welcome to the truth that no one wants to know. My name is Phineas Crowthorne, and I've been driving trucks across Texas since 1989. 34 years on these roads, and I thought I'd developed a sixth sense for danger. You learn to read the signs, which rest stops to avoid, which fellow drivers to keep away from, which loads are more trouble than they're worth. But nothing in all those years prepared me for what I discovered at the Kenton County Rest Area on Interstate 20, just east of Odessa, on that God-forsaken night in March of 2022. It started as a routine run. I was hauling agricultural equipment from Lubbock to Dallas, running behind schedule thanks to a blown tire earlier in the day. It was approaching midnight when I pulled into the rest area, exhausted and desperate for coffee and a few minutes to stretch my legs. The place was nearly empty, just a handful of trucks parked in the back lot, their drivers probably asleep in their cabs, and one RV near the facilities. The rest area itself was one of those older ones the state kept threatening to close but never did. Dim lighting, bathroom facilities that hadn't been updated since the 80s, and vending machines that worked maybe half the time. But it was familiar, and familiarity breeds comfort on the long, dark highways of West Texas. I parked my rig at the far end of the lot, away from the other vehicles. Old habit. Gives you room to maneuver if you need to leave in a hurry, and keeps you away from the occasional lot lizards and dealers who work these places after dark. As I walked toward the restroom facilities, I passed by an old Peterbilt that looked like it had seen better days. Rust eating through the cab, tires that needed replacing, and a general air of neglect that suggested its owner had fallen on hard times. That's when I first noticed the smell. Now, you encounter a lot of unpleasant odors at rest stops, overflowing garbage, backed-up toilets, the occasional dead animal in the brush. But this was different. Sweet and putrid at the same time, with an underlying chemical tang that made my nose burn. It was coming from the direction of that old Peterbilt. I tried to ignore it, went about my business in the restroom. But when I came back out, the smell seemed stronger. And there was something else. A rhythmic thumping sound, muffled but persistent, coming from the truck's trailer. I should have minded my own business. Should have gotten my coffee from the vending machine and headed back to my rig. But after 3 decades on the road, you develop a sense of responsibility for your fellow drivers. What if someone was having a medical emergency? What if they needed help? I approached the Peterbilt cautiously. The cab was empty, windows rolled up tight despite the warm night. The thumping continued, steady and insistent, like someone knocking on a door. The smell was overwhelming now, making my eyes water. "Hello?" I called out. "Everything all right in there?" The thumping stopped immediately. Complete silence except for the distant hum of traffic on the interstate. I stood there for a moment, uncertain, then turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A muffled cry, desperate and terrified, from inside the trailer. My blood ran cold. I'd heard about human trafficking, about trucks being used to transport people across borders and state lines. Without thinking, I grabbed the trailer's door handle and pulled. It was locked, of course, but the lock was old, rusty. I ran back to my truck, grabbed a tire iron, and returned. I know I should have called the police right then. But cell service was spotty at best in that area, and someone inside that trailer needed help now. I wedged the tire iron into the lock mechanism and pulled with all my strength. The lock snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The door swung open, and the smell hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, gagging, my eyes streaming. When my vision cleared, I found myself staring into a nightmare. The trailer had been converted into some kind of living space, if you could call it living. Mattresses, stained with substances I didn't want to identify, lined the walls. Chains and restraints were bolted to the floor. And in the corner, huddled together, were 3 people, 2 women and a teenage boy. They were filthy, emaciated, their eyes wide with terror and something else. Hope, maybe, or disbelief that someone had actually found them. "Please," one of the women whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please help us. He'll be back soon." I didn't need to ask who he was. I helped them out of the trailer, my mind racing. They could barely walk, had to support each other. The boy couldn't have been more than 15, and he hadn't said a word, just stared with hollow eyes that had seen too much. "How long?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Weeks," the older woman said. "Maybe months. I don't know anymore. He takes us out sometimes to work, then brings us back here." I knew what she meant by work. Truck stop prostitution, forced and brutal. I'd seen the victims before, hollow-eyed women and boys standing in the shadows, but I'd never connected them to something this organized, this evil. "We need to get you out of here," I said, looking around the empty rest area. "Can you make it to my truck?" They nodded, and we started moving. We'd made it halfway across the parking lot when headlights swept across us. A man was walking toward us from the restroom facilities, and even in the dim light, I could see his face change when he realized what was happening. He was tall, thin, with the kind of forgettable features that would blend into any crowd. But his eyes were dead, flat, like a shark's. "Well, well," he said, his voice conversational, almost friendly. "What do we have here? Good Samaritan, are we?" "Stay back," I warned, putting myself between him and the victims. I've already called the police." He laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. "No, you haven't. Cell towers don't work out here. I made sure of that when I picked this spot." He pulled something from his pocket, a knife, long and serrated. "You know what your problem is, friend. You couldn't mind your own business. That's when another man emerged from behind the RV. Shorter, stockier, with arms like tree trunks, and a face that had seen its share of violence. He was carrying a length of pipe. Mordecai, the tall one said, never taking his eyes off me. We have a problem. Mordecai Pembroke, I'd learn later, though at the moment all I cared about was the weapon in his hands and the eagerness in his expression. He looked like someone who enjoyed hurting people, who'd been waiting for an excuse. I can see that, Mordecai replied, slapping the pipe against his palm. Want me to handle it? In a moment. The tall one focused on me. You have two choices, friend. Walk away now, forget what you've seen and live. Or play hero and join our inventory. Though I should warn, you, middle-aged truckers, aren't exactly in high demand. We'd probably just dump you in the desert. Behind me, I could feel the victims trembling. The boy finally made a sound, a whimper of pure terror. These people had been through hell, and they were about to be dragged back into it. Unless I did something. Third option, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You walk away. Take your friend and disappear, because I've got a dash cam in my truck that's been recording everything, uploading to the cloud. Even if you kill me, you're already finished. It was a lie, of course. My dash cam was broken, had been for months. But they didn't know that. The tall one's eyes narrowed. You're lying. Want to bet your freedom on that? I asked. Every truck stop from here to California will have your faces within hours. Every cop, every driver, everyone will be looking for you. For a moment, nobody moved. Then I heard it. The beautiful sound of a Jake brake in the distance. Another truck pulling into the rest area. Then another. A small convoy, probably traveling together for safety. The parking lot was about to get crowded. The tall one heard it too, his jaw clenched, calculating odds, weighing options. This isn't over, he said finally. Mordecai, get the van. Mordecai looked disappointed but obeyed. As they retreated, the tall one turned back to me. You've made a serious mistake, Phineas Crowthorne. Oh yes, I know who you are. I can read your truck's registration from here. Crowthorne Hauling, based out of Midland. You have a nice little house on Carpenter Street. Live alone since your wife passed, don't you? My blood went cold. He'd done his research in seconds. Or maybe he just had a gift for reading people, for finding their weak spots. Tick-tock, Mr. Crowthorne, he continued. Every road you travel, every stop you make will be watching. And one night, when you least expect it, you'll find out what happens to people who interfere with our business. They left in a white van with no plates, disappearing into the darkness just as the convoy pulled in. I got the victims into my truck, gave them water and what food I had, and waited for the other drivers to park. Safety in numbers. One of the convoy drivers was a fellow I knew slightly, Thaddeus Blackthorne, who ran regular routes between El Paso and Houston. When he saw the condition of the people I'd rescued, his face went pale. Jesus Christ, Phineas. What happened? I gave him the short version while one of his convoy partners, who had a working satellite phone, called 911. The police arrived within 40 minutes. County sheriffs, state troopers, even a ranger who happened to be in the area. They took statements, processed the abandoned truck, called in federal authorities for the human trafficking angle. The victims were taken to a hospital in Odessa. I learned later that they'd been grabbed from different locations. one from a bus stop in New Mexico, another from a homeless camp in Arizona, the boy from a foster home in Oklahoma. They'd been moved from truck to truck, rest stop to rest stop, sold to whoever had the money. A mobile operation that used the interstate system as its hunting ground and marketplace. The abandoned Peterbilt was traced to a man who'd been dead for 3 years, his identity stolen and used to register the vehicle. The DNA evidence inside the trailer suggested at least a dozen different victims had been held there over time. Some were eventually identified from missing persons reports. Others remained unknown. I gave the best description I could of the 2 men. Even worked with a sketch artist, but they were ghosts. No matches in any database, no prior arrests, nothing. They'd operated in the shadows of the highway system, invisible until that night. The FBI took over the investigation, said it was part of a larger network they'd been tracking. Trucks converted into mobile prisons. Victims moved constantly to avoid detection, sold at truck stops and rest areas across the country. They estimated hundreds of victims over the years, maybe thousands. Most were people who wouldn't be missed. Runaways, addicts, undocumented immigrants. The ones society had already written off. They put me in protective custody for a while, said the threat against me was credible. But after a few weeks with no sign of the men, I had to get back to work. Bills don't stop just because you've stumbled into a nightmare. I changed my routes, varied my schedules, never stopped at the same place twice. I installed security cameras on my truck, carried a gun, stayed hypervigilant. But months passed without incident. I started to think maybe they'd fled the state, even the country. Maybe I was safe. Then, 6 months after that night, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper at a truck stop near Abilene. Just 4 words. We haven't forgotten. M. P. Mordecai Pembroke. He was still out there, still watching. I reported it to the FBI, but there wasn't much they could do with an unsigned note. They suggested I consider changing careers, maybe relocating. But trucking was all I knew, and Texas was my home. I wasn't going to let fear drive me away from either. The notes continued sporadically. Sometimes months would pass with nothing, then I'd find another one. Getting comfortable? Nice new lock on your house. Saw you at the Walmart yesterday. Each one was a reminder that I was being watched, that they knew where I was, where I lived, where I shopped. It was psychological torture, designed to break me down, make me paranoid. And it was working. I stopped sleeping well, jumping at every sound. I varied my routine so much that I could barely keep track of my own schedule. I pushed away the few friends I had left, afraid that association with me might put them in danger. I became a ghost myself, haunting the highways, always moving, never settling. A year after the rest stop incident, I heard about another abandoned truck found at a rest area near Las Cruces. Same setup, a converted trailer, restraints, victims inside. This time, they weren't so lucky. The victims were dead, had been for days. The heat, dehydration, and despair had claimed them, while their captors had apparently abandoned the operation. I wondered if it was the same men, if my interference had made them sloppy, desperate. Or maybe it was copycats inspired by the media coverage. Either way, more people were dead, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow responsible. If I'd minded my own business that night, would those people still be alive? Or would they have just died differently, unknown and unmourned? The FBI agent handling my case, a worn-down woman named Martinez, told me not to blame myself. You saved 3 people, she said. It's 3 more than anyone else managed. These operations don't stop because one gets exposed. They adapt, evolve, continue. All we can do is save who we can when we can. but her words didn't help with the nightmares. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that trailer, smelled that stench, heard the whimpers of the boy who'd been through hell, and sometimes, in the darkest dreams, I saw the faces of the ones I couldn't save. The ones who died in other trailers, on other nights, while I drove past, oblivious. 2 years passed. The notes became less frequent, then stopped altogether. The FBI said the trail had gone cold, that the men I'd encountered had either left the country or found new identities. They closed the active investigation, filed it with thousands of other unsolved cases. Life, such as it was, went on. I tried to return to normal, or at least my version of it. I kept driving, kept hauling, kept my head down. I stopped looking over my shoulder quite so much, stopped checking under my truck for bombs or trackers. I even started stopping at the same truck stops again, developing something like a routine. That was my mistake. It was another March night, 3 years, almost to the day, after the rest stop incident. I was at a Flying J outside of Fort Stockton, grabbing dinner at the attached Denny's. It was crowded, noisy, the kind of place where you could disappear into plain sight. I was working on a patty melt when someone slid into the booth across from me. It was him, the tall one from that night. He looked different, beard, glasses, hair dyed gray, but those dead eyes were unmistakable. "Hello, Phineas," he said pleasantly, as if we were old friends. "Mind if I join you?" My hand moved toward the gun in my jacket, but he shook his head slightly. "I wouldn't. My associate is at the counter, and he has a clear shot. Plus, do you really want to start a shootout in a crowded restaurant? All these innocent people?" I looked toward the counter. Mordecai Pembroke was there. Different look, but same build, same menacing presence. He raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "What do you want?" I asked, my mouth dry. "Just to talk, to clear the air. You see, you cost me a lot of money that night. 3 prime pieces of inventory, plus the truck, plus the heat that came down after. I had to lay low for quite a while, missed out on numerous opportunities." "Those were people," I said, my anger overcoming my fear. "Human beings." "They were products," he corrected calmly. "Supply and demand, basic economics. There's always been a market for human flesh, Phineas. Throughout history and every culture. We just streamlined the process, made it mobile, efficient." "You're insane," he laughed. "I'm a businessman. And like any good businessman, I believe in settling debts. You cost me approximately $200,000 in lost revenue. I've come to collect. I don't have that kind of money." "Oh, I know exactly what you have. 16,000 in savings, another 40 in your 401k, your truck worth maybe 30 used, your house valued at 160. That's, let me see, 146,000. More than enough to cover the debt plus interest." He slid a piece of paper across the table. "Legal documents, transfers of ownership, bank withdrawal forms. All filled out, just needing my signature. Sign everything over to the shell company listed, and we're square. You walk away with your life, start over somewhere else. Refuse." He shrugged. "Well, Mordecai has been eagerly waiting 3 years to finish what we started. This is extortion. This is business. You have 5 minutes to decide." I looked at the papers, then at the families eating around us, unaware of the monster in their midst. If I refused, would he really start shooting? Would innocent people die because of my choices 3 years ago? "If I sign," I said slowly, "you leave me alone?" "Completely. No more notes, no more threats. Scout's honor. You'll never see us again." I knew he was lying. Men like him didn't forgive debts or forget insults. If I signed, I'd maybe buy myself a few days before they came for me anyway. And if I didn't sign, people would die tonight. I need to use the restroom, I said, to think. He checked his watch. 4 minutes. I stood, walked toward the restrooms, pulling out my phone. This time, I actually did call 911, whispering urgently about armed men at the truck stop, possible kidnapping victims in a vehicle outside. Then, I did something else. I activated the emergency broadcast feature on my CB radio app, sending an alert to every trucker within 50 miles. Armed and dangerous individuals at Fort Stockton flying J human traffickers. Stay away. Within minutes, I could hear sirens approaching. The tall man heard them too. He stood quickly, all pretense of calm evaporating. He and Mordecai headed for the exit, but it was too late. Police cars were already pulling into the parking lot, blocking exits. There was a moment of chaos. Mordecai pulled his gun, fired at the first officer through the door. The tall one tried to run but was tackled by a burly trucker who'd heard my broadcast. Gunfire, screaming, people diving under tables. When it was over, Mordecai was dead, shot by 3 different officers. The tall one was in custody, wounded but alive. And in their van, police found 2 more victims, recent grabs who'd been destined for the same fate as the others. The tall one's name, I learned during the trial, was Silas Crenshaw, though he'd used dozens of aliases over the years. He'd been trafficking humans for 2 decades, moving from state to state, always one step ahead of the law. The network he was part of included corrupt cops, border patrol agents, even some judges. The trial exposed a web of evil that shocked even seasoned investigators. He was convicted on multiple counts of human trafficking, kidnapping, and murder. Life without parole. ADX Florence Supermax. During the sentencing, he stared at me from the defendant's table, those dead eyes promising retribution that would never come. I testified in 7 different trials after that, helping to convict other members of the network. Each time, I had to relive that night at the rest stop, describe the horror in that trailer, the terror in those victims' eyes. It never got easier. The 3 people I saved that night testified too. They'd rebuilt their lives as much as anyone could after such trauma. The older woman had reconnected with her family. The younger one was in therapy and working toward a degree. The boy had been adopted by a good family and was starting to speak again. They thanked me for saving them, but I could see in their eyes that they'd never fully escape what happened to them. None of us would. I still drive trucks, though not as much as before. The industry has changed, gotten safer in some ways, more dangerous in others. Technology helps. GPS tracking, panic buttons, constant communication. But the dark spaces remain, the rest stops and truck stops where predators hunt and victims disappear. I stop at that rest area sometimes, the one where it all happened. It's been renovated now, bright lights everywhere, security cameras, regular patrols. But I can still smell that stench if I think about it too hard, still hear the thumping from that trailer, still see the hope in those victims' eyes when they realized they were being rescued. Other drivers know my story, or versions of it. I've become something of a legend. The driver who broke up a trafficking ring, who stood up to the monsters. They buy me coffee, ask for details, treat me like a hero. But I don't feel like a hero. I feel like someone who got lucky, who survived when others didn't, who carries the weight of all those he couldn't save. Late at night, when I'm driving through the empty darkness of West Texas, I think about all the trailers I pass. Most are carrying legitimate cargo, produce, electronics, construction materials. But some aren't. Some are carrying nightmares, horrors that will never make the news, victims who will never be found. I watch for signs now, trucks that shouldn't be where they are, drivers who look wrong somehow, sounds and smells that don't belong. I've called in suspicious activity dozens of times. Usually, it's nothing, but twice it's led to rescues, to victims saved and traffickers arrested. That's my purpose now, my penance for all the years I drove past suffering without knowing it. I'm a sentinel on the highways, watching for the monsters, ready to act when others might look away. It's dangerous, thankless work. The traffickers know who I am, have my picture, know my truck. I'm a marked man in their world. But I keep driving, keep watching, keep ready to act. Because someone has to. Because the dark truth is that human trafficking isn't some rare occurrence, some movie plot that happens in foreign countries. It's happening right now, on the highways you drive every day, at the truck stops where you buy gas, in the rest areas where you stretch your legs. The victims are out there, hidden in plain sight, transported like cargo across the country. They're the missing persons who are never found, the runaways who vanish, the addicts who disappear. They're someone's daughter, son, parent, friend, and they're waiting, praying, hoping that someone will notice, someone will act, someone will save them. So if you're ever at a rest stop late at night and something feels wrong, trust that instinct. If you see a truck that shouldn't be there, a person who seems out of place, a situation that makes your skin crawl, don't look away. Don't assume someone else will handle it. Don't become complicit through inaction. Because the monsters are real. They're out there right now, hunting. And the only thing standing between them and their next victim might be you, making a choice to act, to speak up, to refuse to be a bystander to evil. I made that choice 3 years ago at a rest area outside Odessa. It nearly cost me everything. My peace of mind, my sense of safety, almost my life. But I saved 3 people that night, 3 souls who got to go home, to rebuild, to live. And in the end, that's worth any price. The highways are dark and full of terrors, but they're also full of good people, drivers like me who won't stand by and let evil win. We're out there, watching, ready. And if you ever need us, if you ever see something that shouldn't be, just remember, you're not alone on these roads. The thin line between civilization and chaos runs right down the center of the highway. And some of us have chosen which side we're on. We've seen the darkness, faced the monsters, and decided to fight back. One rest stop at a time, one rescue at a time, one life at a time. That's my story. That's my truth. That's what I found that night at the rest area. Not just victims to save, but a purpose to fulfill, a war to fight. The war never ends, but neither does the fighting. And as long as I can drive, as long as I can watch, as long as I can act, I'll be out there. Because someone has to be. Because the alternative, letting them win, letting the darkness spread unchecked, is unthinkable. And because somewhere out there right now, someone is trapped in a trailer, praying for rescue, hoping against hope that someone will hear them, someone will care, someone will act. I heard, I cared, I acted. And I'll keep doing it until my last mile, my last breath, my last day on these haunted highways of Texas. My name is Zeke Harrowfield, and I've been driving 18-wheelers across the Texas Panhandle for 27 years. In all that time, through countless nights on desolate highways and endless miles of empty road, I've learned one fundamental truth. Never stop for strangers after dark. It's a rule that served me well, kept me safe through decades of solitary driving. But on that October night in 2020, just outside of Dickens County on a forgotten stretch of Farm Road 193, I broke my own rule. And what I discovered at that isolated farmhouse still wakes me up in cold sweats, still makes me check my mirrors for vehicles that aren't there, still makes me wonder how many other travelers have simply vanished into the Texas night without a trace. It was around 11:30 when I first saw him. I was hauling a load of petroleum equipment from Midland to Wichita Falls, running late due to construction delays earlier in the day. The route took me through some of the most desolate parts of Texas, where cell towers are scarce, and the nearest town might be 50 miles away. Farm Road 193 was particularly empty that night. I hadn't seen another vehicle for nearly an hour. He appeared in my headlights suddenly, a figure stumbling along the shoulder of the road. At first, I thought it might be a drunk who'd wandered away from his broken-down vehicle. But as I got closer, I could see he was injured. Blood covered the left side of his face. His shirt was torn, and he was clutching his ribs like they were broken. He was waving desperately, practically throwing himself into the road to get my attention. Every instinct told me to keep driving. This was textbook suspicious. An injured person on a deserted road in the middle of nowhere. It could be a trap, a setup for robbery or worse. But there was something about his desperation, the genuine terror in his movements, that made me slow down. I pulled over about 50 feet past him, keeping the engine running, doors locked. In my mirror, I watched him limp toward my truck. He was young, maybe mid-20s, clean-cut despite the blood and dirt. When he reached my window, I could see he was crying. "Please," he gasped, his voice hoarse. "Please help me. They're going to kill me. They killed the others." "Who's going to kill you?" I asked through the cracked window, my hand on the gear shift, ready to drive off at the first sign of trouble. "The Nightingales. The family at the farm. They're not what they seem. Please, I just need to get away from here. Please." He collapsed against my door, and I could see his injuries were real. Deep gashes on his scalp, bruising around his throat, what looked like defensive wounds on his hands. This wasn't makeup or staging. This kid had been through hell. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. "Get in. We'll call the police at the next town." He practically fell into the passenger seat, sobbing with relief. Thank you. Drive, please, just drive. They'll come looking soon." I pulled back onto the road, accelerating quickly. "What happened? Who are the Nightingales?" "Josiah Nightingale and his family," he said, constantly checking the side mirror. "They own a farm about 3 miles back. I was traveling with friends. Road trip from college. Our car broke down near their property. They offered to help, invited us in while we waited for a tow truck." He paused, wincing as he touched his ribs. "There were 4 of us. Me, my girlfriend Emma, and our friends Tyler and Madison. The Nightingales seemed so normal at first. Josiah, his wife, their son Bartholomew. They gave us food, let us use their phone. But the phone didn't work. They said the lines were down, happened all the time out here." "Where are your friends now?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. "Dead. They're all dead." His voice broke completely. "The food was drugged. We all passed out. When I woke up, I was in their basement, we all were, chained to the walls. And there were others, remains. Oh God, the smell. I'd heard enough. I grabbed my CB radio, tried to raise anyone, but all I got was static. Cell phone showed no signal. We were in a dead zone, completely cut off." "How did you escape?" I asked, pushing the truck harder, watching the speedometer climb past 70. "Bartholomew, the son, he came down to work on Madison. She was screaming, begging. I managed to dislocate my thumb, slip the cuff. When he was distracted, I hit him with a pipe. I don't know if I killed him, I just ran, left the others, left Emma." He broke down completely then, sobbing uncontrollably. In my mirrors, I saw headlights, coming up fast. "That them?" I asked, He turned, looked, and went pale. The truck. That's their truck. Oh God, they found us. The vehicle behind us was gaining ground, an old Ford F-250, built like a tank, the kind of truck that could ram us off the road without taking much damage itself. I pushed my rig harder, but loaded as I was, I couldn't outrun them. "There's a gun in the glove box," I said. "Loaded. Can you shoot?" He fumbled with the latch, pulled out my .38 Special. I've never shot at a person before. Might not have a choice. The truck was right behind us now, high beams blinding in my mirrors. Then it swung out into the oncoming lane, pulling alongside us. I could see two figures in the cab, an older man driving and a younger one in the passenger seat. The younger one was pointing something at us. "Get down!" I shouted. The passenger window exploded. Wind roared through the cab as the kid fired back, wild shots that went nowhere near their target. The truck swerved away, fell back, then came again, this time ramming into my trailer, trying to jackknife us. I fought to control the rig, years of experience keeping us on the road. But they kept coming, ramming us again and again. We were coming up on a sharp curve, the kind that would flip a truck if you took it too fast. I had an idea. "Hold on," I said, and started to brake. The Ford shot past us, unable to slow in time. They took the curve at full speed, tires screaming. For a moment I thought they'd make it. Then the truck tilted, caught the soft shoulder and rolled. It went over 3 times before coming to rest upside down in a field. I should have kept driving, should have put miles between us and that wreck, but I had to. No, had to be sure. I pulled over, grabbed a flashlight and my tire iron. "Stay here," I told the kid. "If anything happens, drive. Don't look back." I approached the overturned truck carefully. The cab was crushed, windows blown out. I could see the driver, the older man, clearly dead, his neck at an impossible angle. But the passenger side was empty, the door hanging open. Blood trail led into the field. I followed it, flashlight sweeping the tall grass. Found him about 30 yards out, the younger one, Bartholomew. He was hurt bad, leg bent wrong, bleeding from multiple cuts. But he was alive, conscious. And when he saw me, he smiled. It was the most disturbing expression I've ever seen on a human face. "You're too late," he said, blood bubbling on his lips. "Daddy called the others. They know about your truck, your license, everything. You're part of it now." "Part of what?" I demanded. "The harvest. Every autumn, we stock up for winter." He laughed, a wet, choking sound. "Been doing it for generations. My great-great-grandfather started it during the drought of 1886. Learned that travelers were sustainable protein. The family tradition continued." I wanted to believe he was delirious, making it up. But his eyes were clear, focused, utterly sincere. "How many?" I asked. This generation, maybe 40, 50. Daddy keeps count in his ledger. Names, dates, how they were prepared. Some we smoke, some we freeze, make sausage jerky, sell some to special customers who appreciate exotic meat. My stomach turned. "You're insane. Your whole family is insane." "We're survivors," he corrected. "In a world of sheep and wolves, we're something else. Something older. And now you've killed Daddy, which means Uncle Mordecai takes over. He's worse, much worse. He likes them alive when he starts cutting." Sirens in the distance. Finally. The kid must have found a way to call for help. Bartholomew heard them too, and his smile widened. "They won't find anything," he said. "The farm's clean by now. Mama knows the drill. Everything's already been moved to the secondary site." "And the police?" "Sheriff Hutchins has been buying from us for 20 years. He'll make sure the investigation goes nowhere." He was fading fast, blood loss taking its toll. With his last breath, he whispered, "You saved one." But we've taken so many, and we'll take more. The family continues. The harvest continues. He died with that smile still on his face. By the time the police arrived, I'd returned to my truck. The kid, his name was Dorian, I learned, was on the phone with state police, bypassing the local sheriff's department entirely. Smart boy. Within hours, the place was swarming with Texas Rangers and FBI. They found the farm, but Bartholomew had been right. It was clean. Too clean. The basement Dorian described had been filled with concrete, still wet. The wife, Margaret Nightingale, claimed to know nothing about any violence, said her husband and son had gone to help some stranded travelers and never came back. She played the grieving widow perfectly, but they kept digging. Found traces of blood in the barn that matched missing persons from across 3 states. Found bone fragments in the pig pen. Found a ledger hidden in the attic, just like Bartholomew had described, listing harvests going back to 1963. Names, dates, methods. Some I recognized from missing persons posters at truck stops. Margaret Nightingale was arrested, but she never broke, never admitted anything. Claimed the ledger was fiction, her husband's disturbing hobby. The blood and bones could have come from anywhere, anytime. Without bodies, without crime scenes, prosecution was difficult. Then other family members started surfacing. Mordecai Nightingale, the uncle, was arrested in New Mexico with a van full of suspicious meat products. Cousins in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana. A whole network of family members, all connected to disappearances along remote highways. The investigation expanded, went federal, became one of the largest serial killer cases in U.S. history. Dorian testified at multiple trials. So did I. We told our story again and again, reliving that night each time. Dorian identified jewelry found at the farm as belonging to his girlfriend Emma. That, plus DNA evidence, was enough for some convictions. Margaret got life without parole. Mordecai got the death penalty. Others got various sentences or disappeared before they could be arrested. But the investigation also revealed how deep the rot went. Sheriff Hutchins committed suicide before he could be arrested. Several other local officials were implicated. There were customers, people who knew exactly what they were buying, who paid premium prices for the Nightingales' special meat. Most were never identified. The full scope of the family's activities may never be known. They operated for at least 60 years, possibly longer. Conservative estimates put the victim count at over 200. Bodies were never recovered, processed, consumed, erased from existence except for entries in that horrific ledger. I tried to go back to driving after the trials ended. Tried to return to my normal life, my regular routes. But every farmhouse I passed looked sinister. Every broken-down vehicle on the roadside could be a trap. Every friendly local offering help could be another Nightingale. The nightmares were constant. I dream about that basement Dorian described, about Emma and the others chained to walls, waiting for Bartholomew to come with his tools. I'd dream about all the travelers who'd stopped at that farm over the years, thinking they'd found help, found safety, only to become products in a freezer. I started researching obsessively. Found patterns in missing persons reports, clusters of disappearances near remote farms across the country. The Nightingales weren't unique. There were others. Had to be. Families or individuals who'd found a sustainable food source in the endless stream of travelers on America's highways. How many were out there? How many were still operating? I compiled files, sent them to law enforcement, but mostly got polite dismissals. Without evidence, without bodies, there was nothing they could do. The successful predators, I realized, were the ones we never caught, never suspected. the ones who made their victims disappear completely. 3 years have passed since that night. Dorian stayed in touch for a while, but the trauma eventually drove him to withdraw from everyone connected to it. Last I heard, he'd moved to Canada, changed his name, trying to start over. I don't blame him. Sometimes I think about doing the same, but I keep driving. It's all I know, all I'm good at. I stick to major highways now, well-traveled routes with plenty of traffic. I never stop at isolated farms, never help stranded motorists in remote areas. I've become the unfriendly trucker who won't give you a ride, won't even roll down his window. Safety trumps kindness in my world now. The Nightingale farm still stands empty. The bank foreclosed on it, but no one will buy it. Locals say it's cursed, haunted by the victims. Maybe it is. Or maybe it's just an old farmhouse rotting away like a bad tooth in the Texas landscape. A monument to the horrors that can hide behind friendly faces and helpful offers. Sometimes, on my routes through West Texas, I take a detour past it. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself it was real, that I didn't imagine it all. The windows are boarded now. Weeds growing through the porch, but the barn still stands, and the basement, filled with concrete, still holds its secrets. I've heard rumors that some of the Nightingale family members who escaped are still out there. Changed names, new locations, but continuing the family business. There are stories from truckers about suspicious farms, about missing drivers, about meat processing plants that operate only at night. Most dismiss them as urban legends, highway folklore. But I know better. The thing about evil, real evil, is that it's patient. It doesn't announce itself with dramatic gestures or obvious signs. It invites you in with a smile, offers you food and shelter, makes you feel safe while it prepares to consume you. The Nightingales understood this. They survived for generations by being helpful, friendly, normal, right up until they weren't. I think about Dorian's friends often. Emma, Tyler, Madison, young people on an adventure, road tripping through Texas, probably posting photos on social media, planning their futures. They thought their biggest worry was a broken-down car. They had no idea they were driving into a generational horror, a family tradition of murder and cannibalism that had lasted longer than most businesses. The official investigation concluded that the Nightingales chose victims carefully. Travelers from out of state, people without strong local connections, those whose disappearances might not be immediately noticed. They avoided killing locally, maintained good relationships with neighbors, participated in community events. They were pillars of the community who happened to be serial killers. But they made one mistake. They took Dorian and his friends as a group. Usually, they targeted solo travelers or couples at most. 4 young college students was ambitious, greedy, and it was their downfall. Because Dorian escaped, because I broke my rule and stopped, because sometimes chance favors the victims instead of the predators. I keep a photo in my truck now. It was in the newspaper during the trial. Emma, Tyler, Madison, and Dorian at the start of their road trip. They're smiling, excited, ready for adventure. 3 of them are dead now, processed and gone, reduced to entries in Josiah Nightingale's ledger. But Dorian survived, and that has to count for something. Late at night, when I'm driving through the empty reaches of Texas, I think about all the farmhouses I pass. Most are just homes to regular families, struggling farmers trying to make a living. But some might be something else. Some might hide basements with chains on the walls, freezers full of unusual meat, families with traditional recipes passed down through generations. There's no way to know. No way to tell the difference between helpful locals and hungry predators. So I keep driving, keep moving, never stopping long enough to find out. It's a lonely way to live, but it's safe. or safer anyway. The Texas highways are full of stories, most of them boring, some of them tragic, a few of them horrific. The story of the Nightingale Farm is all three. It's boring in its mundane evil, a family business carried on for generations. It's tragic in its victims, all those travelers who just needed help. And it's horrific in its implications, that there are others out there, still operating, still harvesting. I'm 63 now, closer to retirement than not. When I finally hang up my keys, I'm moving somewhere crowded, somewhere urban, somewhere far from isolated farmhouses and helpful strangers. Somewhere I can lock my door and know that the monsters are at least a few miles away, hidden by distance and population density. But until then, I drive. I watch the roads, note the patterns, remember the faces, because someone needs to. Someone needs to bear witness to the darkness that lurks alongside our highways. Someone needs to remember the victims, the ones who were saved and the ones who weren't. Josiah Nightingale is dead, crashed on a curve while chasing me. Bartholomew died in a field, smiling about their family legacy. Margaret will die in prison, taking her secrets with her. But their victims deserve to be remembered as more than entries in a ledger, more than products in a freezer. They were people. They had names, lives, futures. They made the mistake of trusting the wrong family, of stopping at the wrong farm, of believing that evil couldn't hide behind kindness. It's a mistake any of us could make. A mistake I almost would have made if Dorian hadn't escaped, if his desperation hadn't overcome my caution. So I keep their photo, I remember their names, and I tell their story. It's not much, but it's something. A small act of defiance against the darkness that consumed them. A reminder that sometimes, just sometimes, someone escapes to tell the tale. And if my story makes even one person think twice about stopping at that isolated farmhouse, about accepting help from those friendly strangers, about trusting too easily in the kindness of others, then maybe those deaths weren't entirely in vain. The harvest continues somewhere. The Nightingales weren't the first, won't be the last. But now we know. Now we're warned. Now we can choose to keep driving, to stay safe, to avoid becoming the next entry in someone's ledger. That's all we can do, really. Stay alert, stay moving, and never forget that monsters are real. They don't live under beds or in closets. They live in farmhouses, drive pickup trucks, and offer help with a smile. They've been doing it for generations, and they're very, very good at it. But sometimes, just sometimes, someone escapes. Someone like Dorian, who lived to tell the tale. Someone like me, who stopped to help and lived to regret it. We're the lucky ones, the statistical anomalies, the ones who glimpsed the horror and survived. We carry that knowledge now, that burden, the certainty that evil exists, that it's organized, generational, and hidden in plain sight. We know that the friendly farmer might be a killer, that the helpful family might be hungry, that the isolated farmhouse might be a slaughterhouse. It's not a comfortable knowledge. It changes you, makes you suspicious, paranoid even. But it also keeps you alive. And in a world where families like the Nightingales exist, staying alive is victory enough. So, I drive, I remember. I warn others when I can, and I never, ever stop at isolated farmhouses anymore, because I've seen what's inside them, what they're capable of, what they've been doing for generations. The Nightingale Farm is empty now, but others are still occupied, still operational, still hungry. They're waiting for the next breakdown, the next lost traveler, the next victim. Waiting with smiles and offers of help, with drugged food and chains in the basement, with family traditions that should have died out centuries ago. But they didn't die out. They evolved, adapted, survived, and they're still out there, somewhere, on some remote farm along some lonely highway, waiting, always waiting, and we drive past them every day, never knowing how close we've come to becoming their next harvest. My name is Zachariah Coldwell, and for 31 years, I've hauled cargo across every back road and highway in Texas. I've seen it all, or thought I had. But what I witnessed at that warehouse complex outside Laredo in November 2021 taught me that some cargo should never be moved. Some facilities should never be entered, and some secrets are worth dying to expose. The load pickup that was supposed to be routine, just another night shift job with hazard pay, turned into a descent into an operation so vast, so horrifying, that even now, living under witness protection, I wake up wondering if they've finally found me. It started with a call from a broker I'd never worked with before. The pay was exceptional. $5,000 for a single night's run from Laredo to a private facility near Brownsville. The cargo was listed as medical equipment, requiring refrigeration and careful handling. The pickup was scheduled for 2 a.m. at a warehouse complex in an industrial district that had seen better days. I should have known something was wrong when they required a background check, blood test, and signed NDAS just to take the job. But money was tight. My daughter had just been diagnosed with leukemia, and the treatment costs were astronomical. $5,000 would cover 2 months of her medication. So I signed the papers, submitted to their tests, and agreed to their terms. The warehouse was in a part of Laredo that even the police avoided after dark. Abandoned factories lined the streets, their broken windows staring like dead eyes. The address led me to a complex surrounded by 12-foot fences topped with razor wire, security cameras every 20 feet, and a guardhouse that looked more military than commercial. The guard who checked me in was a mountain of a man with dead eyes and scars across his knuckles. His name tag read Ichabod Shadowmere, and when he smiled, I noticed several gold teeth. He examined my paperwork with obsessive detail, made 3 phone calls to verify my identity, then finally waved me through. "Bay 7, he said, his voice like gravel. "Don't deviate, don't explore, load and leave, understood?" I nodded, unnerved by his intensity. As I drove through the complex, I noticed things that didn't fit a normal warehouse operation. Armed guards patrolling with dogs, windows painted black from the inside, the complete absence of any company logos or identifying marks, and the smell, a chemical stench that reminded me of hospitals and slaughterhouses combined. Bay 7 was at the back of the complex, isolated from the other loading docks. A man was waiting for me there, tall, thin, wearing an expensive suit that seemed absurdly out of place. He introduced himself as Nehemiah Darkmoor, the night supervisor. "Mr. Coldwell," he said, his voice carrying a slight Eastern European accent. "Punctual, excellent. We value punctuality here. Time is, as they say, money. And in our business, time is considerably more than that." He handed me a tablet with shipping manifests, all perfectly legitimate looking. Medical equipment bound for a research facility, hazardous material declarations, temperature control requirements, everything stamped and certified by the appropriate authorities. "Your trailer has been pre-cooled to the required temperature," Darkmoor continued. -40 degrees Celsius. "Do not adjust it. Do not open the trailer once loaded. Do not stop between here and the destination. Any deviation from these instructions will result in forfeiture of payment and other consequences." "Other consequences?" I asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Legal action. Breach of contract penalties. You did read the NDA, didn't you? The liquidated damages clause alone would bankrupt you several times over." Workers began loading my trailer, and immediately I knew something was wrong. They wore full hazmat suits with contained breathing systems. The containers they loaded were not standard medical equipment cases. They were white, seamless, with biohazard symbols and numbers that meant nothing to me. Each one was handled with extreme care, and I counted at least 40 of them. But what really caught my attention was the sound. As each container was loaded, I could hear something inside. Not mechanical noise, but something organic. Liquid sloshing. And occasionally, something that sounded almost like breathing. "What exactly am I transporting?" I asked Darkmoor. "Medical equipment," he replied smoothly. "Specialized containers for organ transport. Very delicate, very expensive. The sound you are hearing is the perfusion system maintaining viability." It was a reasonable explanation. Organs for transplant needed specialized transport. But 40 containers? That would be an unprecedented number of simultaneous transplants. And the security, the secrecy, the middle-of-the-night timing, none of it added up. As they finished loading, one of the workers stumbled, dropping his end of a container. It hit the ground with a wet thud, and for a moment a seam appeared in its surface. Through that crack, I saw movement. Not mechanical, but biological. Something pale and pulsing. The reaction was immediate. Darkmoor barked orders in a language I didn't recognize. Guards appeared from nowhere. The worker who dropped the container was grabbed and dragged away, his protests muffled by his hazmat suit. Others rushed to reseal the container, spraying it with something that made the seam disappear. "Minor breach," Darkmoor said, though I could see sweat on his forehead despite the cool night. "Contained. No contamination. Your safety is not at risk." "What's really in those containers?" I demanded. His expression hardened. "Mr. Coldwell, you're being paid not to ask questions. I suggest you remember that. Now, time is critical. You need to depart immediately." As I climbed into my cab, I noticed one of the workers had dropped something. A laminated card that must have fallen from his pocket. I palmed it quickly, planning to look at it later. The guardhouse exit was even more thorough than entry. Ichabod Shadowmere personally inspected the trailer seals, checked underneath with mirrors, even had a dog sniff around the entire perimeter. Only when he was satisfied did he open the gate. "Remember," he said, leaning into my window, "straight to the destination, no stops, we'll be tracking you." He wasn't lying about the tracking. As I drove, I noticed a black SUV following at a discreet distance. My truck's GPS showed my route in real time on a display they'd installed, transmitting my location constantly. Any deviation would be immediately noticed. But about 30 miles out of Laredo, cruising down Highway 83 in the dead of night, something went wrong. The refrigeration unit on my trailer started making an unhealthy grinding noise. The temperature gauge began climbing. -40 to -30, -20, still rising. I called the number Darkmoor had given me. He answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting. "Problem with the cooling unit," I reported. "Temperatures rising." I heard him curse in that foreign language. "How fast?" "About a degree every minute. At this rate, it'll reach ambient temperature in less than an hour." There was a pause, then rapid conversation in the background. "There's a facility 20 miles ahead. Abandoned truck stop off exit 314. Pull in there. We'll meet you." The abandoned truck stop was anything but. As soon as I pulled in, lights blazed to life. Multiple vehicles converged on my location. Darkmoor arrived in a helicopter, of all things, landing in the parking lot like it was perfectly normal. Technical crews swarmed my trailer, but even I could tell they were fighting a losing battle. The refrigeration unit was dead, and the temperature inside was rising rapidly. Then I heard it. Screaming. Muffled, but unmistakable. Coming from inside the containers. "Get him out of here," Darkmoor ordered, and guards moved toward me. That's when I made a decision that probably saved my life and doomed it at the same time. I'd been recording on my phone since the warehouse, hidden in my shirt pocket. I ran for my truck, locked the doors, and started a live stream to every platform I could think of. "My name is Zachariah Coldwell," I said to the camera. "I'm at an abandoned truck stop off Highway 83, exit 314. I'm transporting something for a company I don't know, and people are screaming inside the containers. If something happens to me..." The window exploded. Guards dragged me out, but it was too late. The stream was live. Hundreds were already watching. Someone destroyed my phone, but the damage was done. What happened next was chaos. The containers in my trailer began rupturing. Not exploding, but opening from the inside. What came out... I still have nightmares about what came out. They were human, or had been human. But they'd been modified, changed at a fundamental level. Extra organs growing outside their bodies. Limbs that bent in impossible directions. Some had additional eyes, others had none. They moved wrong, breathed wrong, existed wrong. And they were in agony, screaming in pitches that human throats shouldn't be able to produce. Darkmoor's team tried to contain them, but these things, these former people, were beyond help. Some collapsed immediately, unable to survive outside their controlled environment. Others ran into the desert, howling. A few attacked the workers, displaying strength and speed that defied their twisted anatomies. In the chaos, I heard Darkmoor on his phone. "Total breach. Site compromised. Execute Protocol 7. I knew what that meant. They were going to clean up, eliminate witnesses, destroy evidence, including me. But my livestream had done its job. Police were already responding to viewer calls. News. Helicopters were inbound. The first sheriff's car arrived just as Darkmoor's men were advancing on me with zip ties and a black hood. What followed was a standoff. Local police, then state troopers, then FBI, all converging on this abandoned truck stop that was suddenly the center of a biological nightmare. Darkmoor and his team couldn't kill everyone, couldn't contain what was happening. Some of the escaped things were found miles away, their twisted bodies finally giving out in the desert. The investigation that followed revealed a horror beyond imagination. The warehouse in Laredo was one of dozens across the country. They were intake points for a massive human experimentation network. Homeless people, undocumented immigrants, anyone who wouldn't be immediately missed. They were taken, subjected to radical biological modifications, then transported to black sites for further study. The laminated card I'd found was a shipping schedule. Dates, locations, container numbers. But the destinations were all in code, and the origin points were varied: Houston, Phoenix, Atlanta. This was nationwide, possibly global. The experiments were supposedly for medical advancement, growing extra organs for harvesting, testing the limits of human modification, trying to create biological systems that could survive extreme environments. But it had gone beyond science into something monstrous. The subjects were kept alive through their modifications, conscious and aware of what had been done to them. Darkmoor disappeared during the chaos. Ichabod Shadowmere was found dead in the guardhouse. Apparent suicide by cyanide. The warehouse in Laredo was empty when authorities arrived, cleaned out in less than 2 hours. Professional erasure of a site that had operated for years. But they'd left some things behind in their haste. Documents referring to Project Chrysalis, references to buyers in China, Russia, North Korea, payment records showing millions of dollars flowing through shell companies, and photographs, hundreds of them, documenting the progression of human subjects through various stages of modification. I was placed in witness protection immediately. The live stream had made me too visible to simply disappear, but it also made me a target. 3 attempts have been made on my life in the past 2 years. Each time, the attackers were professionals who somehow knew exactly where I was. The FBI says they've shut down 7 facilities connected to Project Chrysalis. They've arrested dozens of people, workers, guards, even some medical professionals who were involved. But Nehemiah Darkmoor remains at large, along with what they estimate to be the core leadership of the operation. And the worst part? They don't think they've found everything. The network is too large, too well-funded, too deeply embedded. For every facility they find, there might be 2 more they don't know about. For every victim they identify, there could be dozens more who simply vanished into the system. I don't drive trucks anymore. Can't. Every time I see a refrigerated trailer, I remember the sounds from inside those containers. Every time I pass a warehouse, I wonder what's really inside. The highways I once loved now feel like arteries in some vast, sick organism, transporting horrors in the dark. My daughter's leukemia is in remission, thank God. But the money I earned that night, I couldn't keep it. Blood money. I donated it anonymously to a shelter for missing persons' families. It doesn't absolve me, but maybe it helps balance the scales slightly. The other drivers I've talked to, the ones who admit to taking similar jobs, all have the same haunted look. We know things are being transported on our highways that shouldn't exist. Medical equipment that screams, agricultural products that have human DNA, industrial supplies that require armed guards and hazmat suits. Most drivers don't ask questions. They need the money, have families to feed, bills to pay. They take the job, follow the instructions, cash the check, and try to forget. But forgetting isn't always possible. Sometimes the cargo makes noise. Sometimes it leaks. Sometimes it escapes. There's a network of us now, drivers who've seen too much. We share information carefully, anonymously. Strange pickups, suspicious facilities, cargo that doesn't match the manifests. We're trying to map the network, identify the operations, provide information to authorities who will listen. But we're fighting shadows. The organization behind Project Chrysalis has resources we can't match. They have people in law enforcement, government, healthcare. They know how to move without being seen, how to operate in the gaps between legitimate business and criminal enterprise. Last month, a driver I knew, someone who'd been asking too many questions, disappeared. His truck was found on Interstate 10 near San Antonio, empty, no sign of struggle. The official report says he abandoned it, walked away, but his family knows better. He'd never leave his rig, never abandon his route. He'd found something, and they silenced him for it. I live in a different state now, under a different name. But I still monitor the networks, still gather information, because someone has to. Someone has to bear witness to what's happening on our roads, in our warehouses, in the dark spaces of American commerce. The woman who handles my case at the FBI, Agent Martinez, tells me they're making progress. More arrests, more facilities discovered, more of the network exposed. But she also admits they're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Project Chrysalis was just one operation among many. There are others, with different names, different methods, same fundamental evil. Human trafficking is one thing, she told me recently. But this is human transformation. They're not just moving people. They're changing them, selling them, using them as raw materials for something we don't fully understand yet. The nightmares are constant. I see those things that came out of my trailer, those twisted remnants of human beings. I hear their screams, smell the chemical stench of their modified bodies. I wonder who they were before, if they had families, if anyone is looking for them. But worse than the nightmares are the moments of clarity, when I realize that this is still happening. Right now, as I tell this story, there are trucks on the highways carrying similar cargo. There are warehouses processing human beings like inventory. There are facilities where people are being transformed into something else, something that serves purposes I don't want to imagine. Nehemiah Darkmoor is still out there. I've seen him twice in 2 years, or think I have. Once in a crowd at an airport, gone before I could be sure. Once in a car next to me at a red light, smiling that cold smile before driving away. Maybe it's paranoia. Maybe it's real. In this life, there's no way to be certain. The FBI wants me to testify at more trials, to help identify more facilities to continue being their star witness. But each appearance puts me at risk, exposes me to retaliation. They can't protect me forever, and we all know it. Eventually, the organization will find me. It's not a matter of if, but when. So I'm telling this story now, getting it all out while I can. Every detail I remember, every person involved, every location I know about. Because when they finally come for me, and they will come, at least the truth will survive. The truth about the warehouse in Laredo. About Nehemiah Darkmoor and Ichabod Shadowmere. About Project Chrysalis and the network of horror it represents. About the trucks carrying screaming cargo through the night. About the drivers who know but say nothing. About the vast conspiracy that operates in the shadows of American commerce. People need to know. Need to understand that the world is darker than they imagine. That humans are being harvested, modified, transformed, and trafficked. That the truck passing you on the highway might be carrying unspeakable cargo. That the warehouse in your industrial district might be a processing center for human beings. I was just a trucker trying to make some extra money for my sick daughter. I stumbled into this accidentally, saw things I wasn't meant to see, and now I'm marked for life. Or marked until death, more likely. But maybe my story will make others look closer, question more, report suspicious activity, refuse those too-good-to-be-true jobs, save someone from becoming another experiment, another modification, another entry in Project Chrysalis's inventory. The highway system is America's circulatory system, moving goods and people across vast distances. But there's an infection in that system, a cancer that uses the same roads, the same infrastructure to move horrors. And until we acknowledge it, confront it, expose it fully, it will continue to grow. Every missing person might be in one of those containers. Every abandoned truck might be a cleanup operation. Every warehouse might hide laboratories where humans are turned into something else. The scope is vast, the evil profound, and the truth almost too terrible to believe. But I've seen it. I've transported it. I've watched those containers rupture and release their modified contents into the desert night. I know what's out there, what's being moved on our roads, what's being done to human beings in the name of science or profit or something even worse. So, when you see a truck driving through the night with too much security, when you notice a warehouse with too many guards, when you hear about someone who disappeared without a trace, remember my story. Remember that there are operations like Project Chrysalis out there. Remember that evil hides in plain sight, using the very systems we depend on. And if you're a driver, if someone offers you a job that pays too well, requires too much secrecy, involves cargo that doesn't make sense, walk away. The money isn't worth it. The consequences last forever. And once you've seen what I've seen, you can never unsee it. Zachariah Coldwell isn't my real name anymore. I'm someone else now, hiding in plain sight just like the monsters I'm hiding from. But the story is real, every word of it. And somewhere out there, Nehemiah Darkmoor is preparing another shipment, Ichabod Shadowmere's replacement is checking another driver's paperwork, and containers full of modified humans are being loaded onto trucks. The warehouse in Laredo is gone, but others remain. The network continues, the experiments proceed, and the highways carry their dark cargo through the night, every night, right past us all. That's the truth I live with. The truth I'll likely die for. But at least now, you know it too.